Okay, it's 9:01. We've got 42 people in the room, so might be time to kick off with the introductory remarks and opening. So my name's Aidan Barker. Oh, my name's Aidan Barker. I'm the Manager for Government and Stakeholder Engagement here at AEMO in Western Australia, and welcome to today's WA Electricity Consultative Forum. In terms of acknowledgement of country, just to note that we're at the getting towards the end of Camberang, or second spring, and many of you may have noticed the acacias in particular flowering right now, lots of yellows and whites. I noticed in particular a couple of days ago the muja, or Australian Christmas trees, coming into full bloom, and something that was shared with me at a previous acknowledgement or welcome to country was that when the muja blooms early, that means that we're possibly in for a hot and a dry summer. So quite timely in terms of our discussion around seasonal readiness today as well. We'll note also that Muja Power Station was named after that plant as well. So with that, AEMO acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land, seas and waters across Australia, and I'm talking to you from Whadjuk Noongar Butja, Whadjuk Noongar land here in Boorloo or Perth. We honour the wisdom of Australian and Torres Strait Islander elders past, present and embrace future generations and leaders emerging. So with that, we'll kick on into the online housekeeping. So this hasn't really changed. It's just the usual kind of online meeting rules. Please place your microphone on mute, otherwise you'll be muted, and it's a little bit embarrassing when that has to happen. Leave your camera off unless you're talking, as it can be a little bit distracting for others. Today, rather than the chat function for questions, we'll be using the Q&A function. So if you look at the top of your screen, you can see the Q&A tab. And we'll be monitoring the Q&A throughout the session today. We'll pause regularly to provide an opportunity for people to ask questions. I'll usually call upon you, unless it's something really, really straightforward, to speak to your question. And when you click on your microphone, you can just say your name, and also if you're from an organisation, what organisation that is as well. We have left some time at the end of the session for Q&A, so if your question needs to wait until then, that's completely fine. If we do run out of time, because we do have a jam-packed agenda today, we will still answer your questions, so have no fear of that. And finally, a recording of the forum will be published on our webpage later on, and usually I think you get an email shot out to advise you of that. And finally, we're always open to further questions and feedback regarding this and other forums, so please don't hesitate to send us an email. This also is a fairly standard slide, which you should have seen before. Essentially, don't do anything that your lawyers wouldn't want you to do. So in the context of competition law, please try to stick to the actual topic of the presentation in terms of the discussion. Decisions and what you say are your decisions alone. And in terms of things not to raise or to discuss, please don't talk about confidential information relating to your customers, who you supply, the price at which you supply them, or future and upcoming contract negotiations. So encourage people, if they haven't already, to take the time to read the slide and familiarise themselves with the content. Okay, like I said, it's a pretty jam-packed agenda today, so I'll finish talking briefly and kick over to Kirsten Rose, our new AGM for WA and Strategy, and over to you, Kirsten.
Great, thanks, Aidan. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, fantastic, thanks. Well, good morning, Kaya, everyone. It's really lovely to be able to join you today. Thank you for the invitation to say a few words and possibly answer a few questions if we have time. I have met some of the people online today, but not everyone. So I thought I would take just a minute and introduce myself. I'm just shy of 3 months at AEMO. I joined in late August, so it's been an absolute whirlwind in those 3 months, and I often describe it as still drinking from the proverbial fire hose. There's a lot to get across. And I'm really delighted to be in this role of Executive General Manager, WA and Strategy for AEMO. A little bit about my background quickly. Previous to AEMO, I had been at CSIRO, the National Science Agency, as the Deputy Chief Executive for a few years. And before that, I had a science portfolio at CSIRO that was not directly focused on energy, but I describe it as kind of energy adjacent. And then previous to that, I spent 5 years at BHP in a global innovation role that was really focused on energy and low emissions technology in particular, and using low emissions technology to make what we described as step change reductions in BHP's greenhouse gas emission profile. And prior to that, quite some time ago, I did spend some time in the WA energy sector specifically. Some of you might remember I was the chief executive of the Sustainable Energy Association. And so I'm really, really delighted to be back, really focused on WA and WA energy in particular. So it's been a great induction, and I'm really, really enjoying the role. And as you can kind of see on this slide, it has been a pretty big 3 months. We've seen lots of key announcements and milestones in the sector, and there's just a few of these kind of called out on the slide here. Things like the grid plan, which outlines WA transmission, the Clean Energy Link, and EPWA's draft community benefits guidelines. We're also clearly seeing the benefits of the WA battery scheme and the federal Cheaper Home Batteries program that's really supporting initiatives like Project Jupiter to enable the integration of DER into our energy system through virtual power plants. Since I've been in the chair as well, AEMO has seen the assignment of capacity credits for the 2027-28 capacity year, working really closely with key partners to make sure the system's ready for the hot season, and getting supplementary capacity kind of squared away as well. We set a new renewable records. We've hit a couple of records actually since I've been here. We hit 88.87% of renewable penetration. I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, which is incredible. I won't go into too much detail on any of this, given that I know it's on the agenda for today's forum, but it's been a really exciting start, certainly, where we've seen a few challenges that the transition is kind of throwing at us really come to the fore in just the few months that I've been here. One thing that I'd like to spend a little bit of time today on is emphasizing how important stakeholder engagement is, certainly for AEMO and very, very much so for me personally. I've really kind of approached my first 3 months in sort of two big sort of chapters, if you will. One of the things I did straight away when I joined was really focused on meeting and talking to a wide array of our stakeholders at AEMO. I think I've had over 40 conversations with over 30 organizations that really range, that really span the full gamut of stakeholders for the organization. And there's still more to do there. And I think it's a little bit like painting a bridge. You kind of go through a cycle, but then you really need to start it all over again and make sure that you're maintaining that connectivity. And it's been really, really useful for me to hear directly from those stakeholders. And I'm grateful for the incredibly warm welcome I received and everyone's willingness to talk to us directly. And I've really kind of kept those conversations intentionally open to understand what's on everyone's mind, what they think AEMO is doing well, and what they think AEMO could be doing better or differently, and any kind of views overall of sort of the market and the system. And that's been incredibly helpful for me to get across things really quickly. And there are some really significant themes that I've heard across all of those engagements. It's probably surprising no one. One thing I've heard really clearly is that we're at an extremely challenging point in the energy the energy transition, where clear investment signals are really, really being kind of asked for. But there remain a lot of unknowns. which we're certainly going to be doing our bit to resolve through things like the WEM electricity statement of opportunities and the WA gas statement of opportunities, and also working, as we always do, really closely with Western Power and Energy Policy WA on planning documents, including the whole of system plan, which is just kicking off now. Another theme that's come out really clearly from our conversations is cost, right? There's a broad recognition that cost is an issue for market participants. There's many dimensions to that. Some, certainly I've had feedback about AEMO's costs. We've had feedback overall about energy costs. Sort of every element of the cost stack, I think, is a concern to some degree, and we'll be covering a little bit about that on the in our forum later today as we look back on 2025. Another hot topic is certainly connections. And we are doing a lot of work with Western Power on streamlining those points of interaction. And that's something that will remain a priority for us. In previous stakeholder engagement surveys that we've run, you have signaled the need for and the desire for much greater transparency from AEMO. And that has been a tremendous focus for the organization over the last year. And I'm really pleased to hear from many of you that there is a sense that we are improving in that area. Still some mixed feedback, to be perfectly honest, but overall, I think the trend line that, at least as I've heard it, has been positive. And one of the examples of that people have called out is our major programs working group. This has been set up to really facilitate effective engagement on reform between AEMO, EPWA, rural participants, and consumer representatives on the planning, implementation, and management of our major projects. And so that's something that we'll talk a little bit about. But I think from my perspective, making sure that we maintain that forum, that we build on that forum, and that we continue to find additional ways to be as transparent as we possibly can. It is something that I am really personally really committed to, transparency and responsiveness. And I'll continue to really focus on being clear about why AEMO may have certain views about things and really critically the basis for our decision making. So we're really trying to do more around not just communicating, what we're deciding. Certainly we'll keep doing that, continue communicating the facts, but also as much as we can about the why and the how of how we get to decisions. And that's not just at the executive level, but we really are focusing on shifting our ways of working to ensure this is happening at all organizational levels where our staff are engaging with you. And so, I really stressed with everyone I spoke to that we are really keen to hear from you. So please don't necessarily wait for a formal engagement. Don't necessarily wait for a stakeholder survey. If there's something you think I or we need to hear, please reach out directly. I'll always make time to sort of talk to our stakeholders and understand the sentiments out there. In terms of what's next, right now the publication of the WA Gas Statement of Opportunities, or the GSU, is really top of mind for us. That's being published on December 17th. We had a gas forum earlier this week, which some of you might have attended, and this is the first time we're extending the GSU outlook from 10 years to 20 years in our planning horizon, which is, I think, a great advancement in the evolution of that report, and something that we really genuinely hope assists in decision making and investment planning. Another focus for us, and this will be a big focus over the coming year, is AEMO's allowable revenue framework. We're working really closely with EPWA, the ERA, and stakeholders on the detailed development of that and the implementation of a new fit-for-purpose regulatory regime under the ARF. So that's something that we're working on. And I think in terms of things that are really top of mind, that's what's kind of immediately on the horizon. I am also really focused as a new leader here on understanding our team really well and understanding the capability and how we can best support the sector and the government and EPWA and all of you on navigating through what we all know is going to be a really big few years as we really kind of get into the crunchy bit of the transition. And I'm also spending time looking and and understanding the broader AEMO organization and really how we can bring the best of AEMO wherever it sits in the country and leverage that here in Western Australia for the benefit of WA consumers. So I'll leave it there, Aidan. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. Not sure how we're going on time or if you want to do questions now or later, but thanks. It's been great to have a few minutes to talk to you.
Thanks for that, Kirsten. We're doing fine for time, and there is no questions in the Q&A tab.
It's crashed. It's crazy, isn't it?
Can you please stick your mic on mute, whoever didn't have it on mute. Yeah, we're doing okay for time. There's no questions currently in the tab. Please, though, if something does occur to you later on, you have a question for Kirsten or anybody else, please just stick it in there and we will get to it. Thank you, Kirsten. All right, so just a very quick update from me. Next slide, please, Laura. So that was a great wrap, I suppose, that Kirsten gave in relation to the Major Projects Working Group. It's something that I've spoken about at these forums previously as being a really key initiative in terms of transparency and really going to, I suppose, opening the door or lifting the lid on how we're thinking about major projects and how we approach planning and consideration of things like impacts to ours and other people's systems and cost and timing estimation as well. So the most recent MPWG meeting was on the 19th of September. There was 4 major implementation assessments tabled as part of that. One in relation to the implementation of the new RLM, so that we can get that up in time for the 26 reserve capacity cycle, real-time market submission enhancements to deal with the escalating quantity of data that the system is dealing with, WEM and Swiss Power System modelling, so material improvements to our internal modelling capability, reducing our reliance on external consultants, which ultimately means that we can do things at a lower cost, far more flexibly, when we're developing major bodies of work and publications such as the WEM ESU and the WAGSU as well. And finally, relatively minor operational enhancements, but nonetheless extremely important for the day-to-day management of the power system. So notable outcomes from that is like there was some reconsideration of the RTMS solution to be implemented, and that was followed up with the industry testing forum, the ITF, on the 5th of November. There's a link in the pack that was previously sent to you to the final implementation assessments. Like I said, these are fantastic documents in terms of the level of detail provided around timing, cost, and impact estimation, and are really, going into and reflecting thinking around our internal governance of these major projects as well. In terms of the next MPWG meeting, scheduled for the 1st of December, so week after next, and there will be another 4 implementation assessments. So the first one's on the market surveillance data catalogue, the third stage implementations, ensuring that AEMO can comply with its WEM rule, electricity system and market rule obligations to provide data through to the Economic Regulation Authority. Also implementation of improvements to DSP participation that have come through the ESM rules, operational forecasting improvements, and dispatch training simulator and SCED offline tools to assist both you and us. Also, there you see there's a link to the WEM implementation roadmap. Again, a really important resource for people to have a look at on our website that lays out that forward plan for changes to our system and the implementation of ESM rules. So, yeah, definitely want to do a plug there. Check it out. It's a lot of information, and there is a link there in terms of an email for you to ask any questions that you might have. So with that, I think I'm handing over to Nicholas Nielsen for a look at the year in review.
Thanks, Aidan. I'll just check that you can hear me and see me okay.
I can, but the slides have disappeared.
Okay, very good. I guess I'll share my slides. That's okay. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay, very good. Can you see the slides now?
Brilliant. They're up.
Cool. All right, so good morning, everyone. Lovely to be here with you today. In case anyone out there doesn't know who I am, hasn't run into me yet, my name is Nicholas Nielsen. I manage the real-time market monitoring team here at AEMO, and to put it very succinctly, we are responsible for the WEM dispatch engine and the real-time market submission system. So what I want to share with you today is essentially just well, we've called it a year in review. It's essentially just a look back at a few highlights and a few trends and a few events from this year just gone. We could probably spend all day giving a very detailed year in review. This is just a very high level one. Happy to take any questions, but given the general nature of the presentation, you'll have to accept that I do my best to answer any questions. So. Jumping in, we've set, as Kirsten mentioned, we've set a number of records this year. The sort of biggest ticket items, of course, are a new all-time maximum operational demand record on the 20th of January at 4,486 megawatts, a minimum unscheduled operational demand on the 16th of November, so less than a week ago, of 383 megawatts, and a maximum renewable contribution about 2 weeks ago at 88.97%. I'll briefly just touch on it in case anyone's not familiar. The difference between operational demand and unscheduled operational demand is that in the unscheduled operational demand, we remove the demand that comes from scheduled batteries. So obviously, where we have batteries participating in the market, AEMO can schedule those batteries to withdraw. So this is essentially the demand that we would have had if those batteries hadn't been available to withdraw. I'm going to touch on a couple of these records in some more detail later on in the presentation, but I also wanted to call out a few sort of fuel-specific records. So we set new maximums for gas at almost 2,600 megawatts, wind just over a gigawatt, and BESS injection or battery injection at 624 megawatts. Others that I haven't called out here, a number of other records of interest that I haven't called out here. We also had seasonal operational demand records for winter, just over 4,000 megawatts, and in autumn for almost 4,040 megawatts. And it's quite incredible because just a year and a half ago, those winter and autumn records would have been all-time maximum records. So it just goes to show just how much increase in demand we've seen and how challenging the system is in the last couple of years. Those are, like I said, those winter records are comparable to summer records just 2 years ago. And we've also seen a minimum gas record of just 16 megawatts, which is quite incredible to be running the system even just for a short amount of time with so little gas. And of course, we've seen maximum battery withdrawal at 750 megawatts. And that's just a reflection of the rapid increase in battery participation we've seen in the last year. So taking a closer look at that maximum operational demand day, the 20th of January this year, it was a very hot day. It was 44 degrees and a little bit unusual. It was quite cloudy, and that was being driven by tropical cyclone Sean, which was sitting off the coast at the time. And those cloudy conditions meant that DPV output was really being limited through the middle of the day, and that's why you can see this very rapid increase, hitting almost 4,000 megawatts as early as 3 p.m. Now we did see a bit of a break in the clouds in the afternoon, which probably limited the or prevented the maximum record from being even higher than it eventually was. But this record still, it smashed the previous maximum operational demand record by 256 megawatts, which is an enormous jump. We normally see relatively incremental increases in these records, but this was just a jump by, you know, almost around 5%, which is incredible. And at this time, 6:30 in the afternoon, we only had about 540 megawatts of headroom left. So it was a very challenging day. We did declare an LOR2, and we activated about 95 megawatts of NCAS, and I have 12 megawatts of supplementary capacity. So, you know, those helped us get through that maximum. Now, I won't go into any more detail on this day right now, but if you are interested in knowing more about it, we reported on it in a little bit of detail in the February WACF, so you can jump on our website and have a look at those slides. I think there's also a recording if you're interested in learning more. Having a look at energy prices through the year. So this graph shows those prices through the year. The box and whisker plot is showing the 10%, the 25th percent, the 50% or the median, 75% and 90th percentiles. And the dot and the line running through it is showing the average. So the most striking observation is just this virtual disappearance of those low prices, or at least the significant reduction in the frequency of those low prices. And that is really primarily being driven by the rapid increase in the number of batteries in the system. Those are obviously tending to withdraw during the middle of the day when we previously had a lot of negative prices. And by virtue of increasing the demand through that day, they are also increasing the price during that day. And so that's why we've seen this significant decrease in the frequency of these negative and very low prices. On the other hand, they are also bringing the price down during the evening peak, right? So it kind of goes both ways. They're soaking up some of that low cost energy in the middle of the day, and they're shifting it to the end of the day. So it kind of, it has, what we've noticed, and Adrian will talk about this or show this later, but it's really narrowed the typical price variability through the day. And we did have a couple of very large facilities, BESS facilities, or one or two commissioned around this December time. And that's why you see the very significant decrease between November and January. Another thing which would have had an effect was the change to the FCAS uplift framework, which occurred in late November last year, which also had the effect of driving prices up a little bit during the middle of the day. We saw peaks in energy prices, average energy prices in August, and to a lesser extent in July. We had very cool weather, especially compared to last year in those months, and we had quite rainy weather, which was limiting the DPV production as well. Including, and we also saw Perth's coldest day in 50 years on the 25th of August, and that ended up being quite a challenging day to manage as well. But in the last few months with spring, we've seen more mild sunny conditions, which has been more conducive to low demand and high DPV and those lower prices that we typically see through spring. Looking more broadly at all market costs, this graph, which we've shared a number of times before, basically what it does is it tries to take all of the costs in the market and then normalize them according to the total amount of consumption in the system. And what this allows is for a more direct comparison between the average energy price with, say, the overall cost of FCAS or reserve capacity or so on. It's worth noting that this cost stack is not going to be 100% accurate for any given participant, because participants have different levels of exposure to different costs depending on whether they are generators or consumers, and what kind of services they provide and what kind of times they are active. But it does give an overall indication of the costs in the market. So again, just to call out a few key trends, there's been a very significant reduction in the total uplift costs, and in particular FCAS uplift costs, and that was driven by the change in the FCAS uplift framework, which happened in last November. We also at the same time saw a temporary price cap removed from the FCAS enablement costs. However, we've also seen an I'd say equally striking, but maybe slightly more gradual drop in FCAS enablement costs, which are these ones in red. And what that's been driven by is just a huge increase in the total amount of accredited FCAS which is available in the market, which comes from all the new batteries that we've seen accredited. So we're seeing a lot more competition in those markets, a lot of low-cost FCAS being offered by a lot of these batteries, and that's driven a very significant decrease in the FCAS costs overall. On the other hand, we've seen an increase, a bit of an increase in the cost of reserve capacity and NCAS, particularly peak NCAS, as we've seen new reserve capacity prices come in this October, and also a number of new NCAS contracts commence from October, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So overall, if we compare this capacity year just finished, 2024-25, with the previous one, we're seeing an increase of about $9 per megawatt hour year to year. Looking at facilities throughout the year, we've had a number of batteries, 3 batteries commissioned with a combined capacity of 725 megawatts. And that, as I mentioned, or as I hinted at, that doesn't just help with the energy market, but it also helps us with in the FCAS markets, because a lot of these batteries have been accredited for FCAS. We've also seen the WEM's first waste to energy and hybrid facilities, which is very exciting. So the Phoenix Kwinana waste to energy facility, 46 megawatts, and the Cunderdin hybrid facility, which is a combined solar battery facility, which is 100 megawatts. We also saw the decommissioning of Muja G6 in April, which is almost 200 megawatts of coal capacity, which has gone out of the market now. So with that in mind, we'll take a quick look at the fuel mix. So on the left-hand side here, I have the sort of the monthly average fuel mix for the major fuels. And on the right-hand side, we have sort of the annual trends. And I think that's the one that is a little bit more interesting and I want to focus on. So what we actually saw this year was actually a slight increase in the percentage of energy that we got from coal, which is very interesting in the context of the decommissioning of Muja G6. And we think that the reason this is that the batteries have increased the demand through the middle of the day. And that means that the coal facilities, while the demand has been a bit higher, coal facilities have been able to stay on, maybe don't need to curtail as much or decommit as often through the middle of the day. On the other hand, we've seen a slight decrease in gas. Probably a couple of factors there. One of them is the change to the FCAS market, or the FCAS framework, which has seen gas facilities more likely to decommit during the middle of the day rather than stay on to provide inertia. And we've also seen, of course, batteries injecting during the evening peak, which has displaced gas a little bit. So overall, the gas and combined gas and coal percentage has stayed relatively stable compared to last year, maybe dropped a little bit. Which means that, of course, our average, or sorry, what I'll do is I'll go on to the next slide, because this takes more of a focus on the renewables, which I think is quite interesting. And what we've seen in terms of the renewables is our highest yet average for the year, 38% of our energy coming from renewables overall. And we've also seen a new record in terms of our peak renewable energy, or peak contribution coming from renewables. And actually going in on that, zooming in on that one a little bit, we haven't just seen a new record, but actually in the last just over a month, we have set 9 of our 10 all-time peak renewable contribution records. So this graph in red is the old record, 85.1%, which was which was from November last year. And then here are all the other top 10 records that we have set in the last month and a half. The yellow ones are the ones which were at the time the highest ever record. So you can see we've pretty quickly jumped from 85% to 88.97%. Just a smidgen under 90% does raise the question of whether we maybe we'll crack that 90% record next year, which would be quite exciting. But obviously, as this gets higher and higher, we start to hit the barrier where we may not be able to get much higher until we find non-thermal sources of inertia for the system. So I think that really highlights the importance of some of the work that we're doing in our engineering roadmap, looking at those sources of inertia. So looking at that maximum renewable contribution day, it was on the 3rd of November at 11 a.m. And at that time, we had an estimated 2,025 megawatts of DPV, a little over 500 megawatts of wind, 150 megawatts of grid solar, and 387 megawatts of withdrawal by batteries, which helps to unlock some of those renewables and helped to contribute to that record. So really exciting times to see those high levels of renewable penetration coming more and more often. Starting to get towards the end now. Just a quick look at the market suspensions. We've had 2 market suspensions this year. The first one in June was related to an AEMO IT issue, and the second one, which was just a couple of weeks ago on the 4th of November, was due to a Western Power IT system issue, and then combined with an unrelated issue that we experienced with our automatic generation control, or AGC. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that second market suspension later. But if you're interested in learning more, we have published preliminary reports on our website. There's a link in the pack where you can just jump on Google and search for AEMO WEM incident reports. And in both cases, we will be putting out an updated report or a final report as soon as we can. Of course, as well of these, we've seen a number of other challenges in the system that I haven't had time to jump into. I obviously talked a little bit about the record demand in January, but we also had a blackout in Kalgoorlie in September. We had challenges with battery coordination and gas supplies on the 25th of August. Just to call out a couple of the most significant ones, but with so many records being set, it's been a very dynamic and exciting time here in operations. Lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about NCAS. So last year we provided a forecast of the NCAS costs for the year. So we wanted to follow up on that this year and just let you know how it panned out. So for capacity year 24-25, AEMO had 11 NCAS contracts, and we forecast a cost of up to $190 million. That's availability costs only. The activation costs are much harder to forecast, so we kind of didn't really try to put a number on it at the time. And so throughout the capacity year, the total cost ended up being $122.8 million in availability costs. And the reason that that's a bit lower than the forecast is just because there's a bit of unavailability, a bit of outages. A couple of contracts started a little bit later than initially planned. So that's resulted in the slightly lower than projected costs. We also had an additional $225,000 in activation costs, which weren't, like I said, weren't factored into those forecasts. So overall, the actual costs ended up being about 2/3 of what we forecast last year. Looking forward, those same contracts are continuing for this capacity year, and we expect them to have an availability cost of, again, up to $190 million. We're also commencing 10 additional contracts as of this October, or starting from this October, which we forecast to have a cost of up to $200 million. So a total of up to $390 million through the year in NCAS. Obviously, we expect it to end up being slightly less than that due to outages through the year, unavailability through the year, but it's hard to forecast exactly how much, and there'll be some additional activation costs on top of that. Looking further forward into 2026, a number of contracts, both 2024-26 and 2025-27 contracts will end in that capacity year, so we expect the total cost there to be up to $190 million. And finally, I don't have a slide for this, but looking back to last hot season, in terms of supplementary capacity, we procured 198 megawatts and we had 5 activations, which resulted in a total cost of $24.9 million. I won't mention any more details on that right now, but if you are interested in it, I encourage you to go back and have a look at the May WACF, where we reported on it in a bit of detail. And I think we might have also talked a bit about it in our Q1 2025 QED. That's it from me for the year in review. Were there any questions, Aidan?
Thanks, Nick. Probably for the first time in my experience, we're running well ahead of schedule. There's no questions in the chat, which is fine. But if anybody does have a question, just haven't had time to put it in the chat, happy for people to raise their hand now. If you've got a question, might just leave 5 seconds for people to do that before we move on to the next part of the presentation. 3, 2, 1. No questions, Nick. Move on.
No worries. Well, it's me again. I'm going to keep talking. So if you do think of any more questions during this next section, I'm happy to come back and answer those as well. So as many of you are aware, and if you weren't aware, I just told you a couple of minutes ago, we had a market suspension on the 4th of November, the second market suspension since the new WEM commenced in October 2023. And I just wanted to give a quick overview. We are still investigating. We are still gathering all of the details and working on a final report, which will be published sometime next year. But we want to get as much information out as early as possible as we can to try and help you keep you aware of what's going on. So in a very brief summary, the real-time market was suspended between 17:15 and 21:30 on the 4th of November, and the reason for that was that AEMO had lost all SCADA connection between AEMO and Western Power. So inside our control room, we didn't have visibility of what all the facilities around the Swiss were doing, and through SCADA, and we weren't able to send automatic instructions through to them through our systems. So quite a significant issue. The immediate cause was an issue in Western Power's IT system, which resulted in that ICCP link between AEMO and Western Power being lost. However, once that was resolved, we were impacted by an unrelated issue with AEMO's AGC, Automatic Generator Control or Generation Control. We were impacted by an issue in that system, which resulted in a delay to the return of the market. Now, our preliminary findings are that we maintained power system security throughout the event. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but obviously AEMO had to intervene in the market to send manual instructions. We worked very closely with Western Power. We had very, very close communications with them. They still had visibility of the market. So through that, we were able to help maintain power system security. So we are revising price outcomes for the period. I don't think it's quite in our system just yet, but we are very close. So I'm going to share some price outcomes with you in a moment, but please treat them as preliminary, but we will be updating them in the system as soon as we can. We have published a preliminary report on our website. Again, I've included a link here, or you can just jump on Google and search AEMO WEM incidents, and we're planning to release a full report by August next year. So jumping into a little bit more detail, I'll walk you through the timeline. This is also available in that preliminary report that I mentioned. So at 15:08 hours, the SCADA outage began. The control room noticed that loss of SCADA within a minute, and we started activating our IT response pretty much immediately. By 15:29 hours, we had begun manual dispatch, working with Western Power and working with facilities, and working off our last available pre-dispatch or dispatch and pre-dispatch schedules. At 17:15 hours, we suspended the market. So up until then, we were still, the market hadn't been suspended, but we were dispatching manually. After 2 hours, we felt that the scale of those interventions was just distorting the market too much, and it was time to suspend the market. Pretty soon after that, the SCADA feed was reestablished. However, that's not to say that the issues were all resolved immediately, because obviously once we have SCADA, there's a bit of a process to get facilities back onto automatic generation control, get them aligned with the WEM dispatch engine results again before we can return the market. We also have a minimum notice period of returning the market of 2 hours that are in the ESM rules. So at 17:29 hours, we advised market participants that we plan to resume the market at 19:30 hours. That's the 2 hours notice that I just mentioned. However, during that period, 17:25 until about 19:05, as we were attempting to move facilities back onto automatic generation control, we experienced a number of issues where facilities didn't respond in the way that we expected them to, based on the signals that we thought we were sending them. And so we had a number of challenges through this time, trying to get them back onto the system, investigating what the issue was. And by around 19:05, we identified that it was indeed an issue inside our AGC system, and not an issue on the facility side or in the communications between us. So by 19:20 hours, we still hadn't resolved those issues, so we decided that it was necessary to delay market resumption. So we sent out a market advisory notifying that the suspension would be, or the resumption of the market would be delayed until 21:30. By 19:21, we started using the WEM dispatch engine again. At 19:36, we sent out that advisory that I just mentioned, that we were pushing back the resumption to 21:30 hours. And by 8:10 or 20:10 hours, by that time, we had all generators back on AGC, and systems were pretty much working. So from this time, the system was functioning, the system was stable. We had all the facilities off manual control, back to normal operations. And at 21:30, we were able to lift the real-time market suspension. So that's the high level overview of the timeline. Like I said, we have released a preliminary report. There's a bit more details on the actions we took in that preliminary report. I encourage you to go and have a read of that report. And if you do have any feedback, please feel free to get in touch with us. Having a quick look at the preliminary prices, or the preliminary, as I just noticed a typo that I made. So these are the prices that we are going to set in the market for the period that was affected by the SCADA dropout and the market suspension. There's two different mechanisms for setting those prices. However, like I said, we're still just finalizing them. We're just getting them into the system, maybe today or in the next couple of days. So please treat these as potentially subject to change. However, they shouldn't change too much, I expect. So between 15:10 and, well, no, let me take a jump back and talk about these lines. So the red lines, the solid red line shows the final market clearing prices, which are going to be used for settlement. The yellow dotted line show the prices that were forecast in the dispatch schedule at 15:05. Dispatch schedules are only for a 2-hour period. So as well as that, we look at the 1500 pre-dispatch schedule, which looks at a longer period of time, but only provides trading interval or half-hour granularity on forecasts rather than 5-minute granularity. So that's what this dotted purple line is. Within this shaded area here, that was when the SCADA, our system was impacted by the SCADA dropout, but we hadn't yet suspended the market. So for that period of time, we're going to declare that these are affected dispatch intervals, and we're going to set the prices according to the affected dispatch interval rules. Now, the best available, because we didn't have SCADA feeds, we don't have a good alternative for using that. Well, because our SCADA feeds were impacted, we do consider the SCADA feeds to be manifestly incorrect. However, unfortunately, we don't have better alternative SCADA data. So the best we can do is use the best available forecast prices. So for the period 15:10 until 17:05, the best available prices come from that 15:05 dispatch schedule. And then for the last couple of dispatch intervals, so 17:10 and 15, or sorry, 17:05 and 10, the best ones there are from the pre-dispatch schedule. So those are the schedules that we'd be using to set the prices in that period of time. In this yellowish shaded area, that's the period of the market suspension. Now, the process for setting prices in that period is to use the average of the last 28 days. So that's what these prices in the solid red line, that's where they come from. So just taking a look at those, the average prices are a little bit different from the 1500 pre-dispatch schedule. We don't really see this this spike which was forecast in that schedule, but overall they're sort of relatively similar, and they obviously reflect the average price for this period over the last 28 days, and so that works out to be sort of between $100 and $140. This was, of course, occurring sort of towards the end of the evening peak, which is why those prices are relatively high. We will also use the exact same process that I just described to set prices for all of the FCAS market services. So I'll just flick through those very quickly and just comment on some of the price outcomes. So for the RAISE markets, in both cases, we saw forecasts of a couple of price peaks. The actual prices based on the averages from the last month look a little bit different, but they sort of sit in the same range of $0 to $40-ish. So the exact timing is a little bit different, but the sort of magnitude of the prices is quite similar really to what the forecast was. And then for lower prices throughout the suspension period, we had forecast 0 prices. When we look at when we end up using the average prices from the last month instead, we don't get $0 prices in all intervals. We do see a few price spikes, but they are relatively small price spikes, sort of up to around $5, $4, $1. And what we see with lower services is that they do often tend to clear at $0 during the evening peak. So that's why in a lot of these intervals, the average from the last month was in fact 0 or very close to 0. But at the same time, it means that the average price can be a little bit sensitive to price spikes that have occurred in individual dispatch intervals throughout the last month. So these all of these prices are, well, just to mention Rock-Off Control Service. Rock-Off Control Service has cleared at $0 throughout. So I didn't think it was worth graphing that. It wouldn't be a very interesting graph. So like I said, these prices will be reflected in our system soon. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to send us a message. Taking a quick look at the system security side of things, here I have a trace of the frequency throughout the period. So you can see we have a bit more variability than usual, which is what you might expect for a period where we are dispatching manually rather than automatically using WEM dispatch engine. But we only had 2 excursions beyond the normal operating frequency band excursions. Both of them were very brief. The first one happened at 1647. The frequency dropped outside the band for about 2 seconds, and that was linked to, or that was caused by a generator trip. The generator trip had nothing to do, as far as we can tell, with the loss of SCADA. So it's just incredible bad luck that it happened at the same time that we were dealing with that issue. The second time we saw a frequency excursion was at 1736 hours, dropped below outside the band for almost a minute and a half. This one was related to AEMO trying to bring facilities back onto that automatic generation control, the AGC that I mentioned earlier, and seeing an unexpected response from one or some of those facilities. So we managed to recover from that, and throughout the rest of this period, we eventually managed to get the AGC working again. Like I said, 1921 hours, we started using WEMD for dispatch again, so you see the variability decrease a little bit, and by about 10 past 8, so around here, we had everyone on automatic generator control again. By 21:30, you can see things are looking pretty much normal again, and that's when we resumed the market. So like I said, we've completed only preliminary investigations. We are still working through that, looking at everything in more detail. But from what we can see so far, we think that we consider that system security was maintained throughout this period, despite a couple of brief excursions outside that band. So wrapping up, these are the next steps and recommendations. These are reflected in the preliminary report, which is available on our website. So first of all, we will publish a final report on the incident. Our current timeline is to complete that by August next year. This report will include things like confirmation on the source and the impact of the SCADA outage, finalization of our system security assessment, final details on the setting of the market clearing prices and analysis on those price outcomes, an update on these next steps and recommendations, including any other recommendations that we might identify between now and then. As you can see there, we'll present at the WACF. That's what I'm doing right now. We'll also present this at the RIF, which is scheduled to come up soon. If you're interested in attending the RIF and you haven't already received an invite, again, please send us an email. Western Power will continue to investigate the issue and investigate any mitigating actions for the SCADA outage for the future. And they'll also investigate and share the root cause with the SCADA working group. We're also going to investigate on our side and mitigate the root cause of the AGC issues that we experienced, and that is already ongoing. We're going to update our internal procedures to clarify some of the real-time market resumption processes. The situation that we found ourselves in, where we announced the resumption of the market and then had to delay it, is not ideal. There's a potential that that sends confusing messages to market participants. So we're going to work through how we could have done that better. And again, if you have any feedback for us, please let us know. We'll share lessons learned in our real-time operations training session, so with our control room and the other people in WA operations that support the control room. And we also recommend that we have an industry consultation on that 2-hour notice period for resuming the market. We'd like to hear from you whether you think that 2 hours is too much time, whether it could be reduced, whether it's the right amount of time, or whether it really needs to be more. We obviously want to strike the right balance between ending the suspension as quickly as reasonably possible, but also giving participants enough notice that they can prepare for the end of that market. So again, I will finish with a final exhortation. Please go and have a look at the preliminary report that is on our website. Please let us know if you have any feedback on that suspension or your experiences through it, or anything that's in our report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. People have been waiting very patiently. We will get to them in a moment because they did relate to the year-end review. But just before we get onto them, Jenny Laidlaw, you've chucked your hand up. I assume it's in relation to market suspension. So we might just deal with that one first. Jenny, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. It's just, have you had a chance to look at the energy uplift payments for the market suspension, what they look like?
No, I haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Great.
But we can take that question on notice and get back to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we don't get the settlement results, the preliminary settlement results now, so that's the question. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks for that, Jenny. Right, so relating to the previous presentation on the year in review, the first question's from Brad Smart around synthetic inertia. Do you want to speak to that, Brad?
It was just a simple question. It's probably in the engineering stream that AEMO are doing if there was an update on, we're getting a lot of big batteries in, and there's a lot of potential to help with some virtual inertia if we can use it.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's another one of my colleagues online who's more familiar with where we are in that process, but on a high level, it's part of our engineering roadmap. We are looking at we normally talk about alternative sources of inertia because we don't want to limit it to just synthetic inertia. There's also, the opportunity to get inertia from technologies such as syncons. So I'm afraid I don't have a detailed update on the status of that work, but it certainly is a priority, and it's something that's really important for us to be able to achieve that 100% renewable contribution that we are working towards. Yeah, I haven't seen anyone come online, so I assume that the right colleagues aren't available right now.
No, that's I did ask if anyone was able to respond to that question in detail. We may need to provide more information later on So thanks for the question anyway, Brad. Next question's from Wayne Trumbull regarding NCAS cost recovery and some of the sums that we had up earlier. Wayne, do you want to ask your question?
Thanks, Aidan. Nicholas, if we go back to the buildup of costs, I just want to make sure that I understand what's in, what's out.
Yep.
So this is costs before market fees, or does it include AEMO fees?
I think the fees are included in this this lighter purple.
Okay. Now, if we look at that figure of, we're now over $140 compared to the comparable figure for 2023, the average was $88.50, so we're up about 70%. If we then look at your slide with regard to the NCAS costs, which will increase to $390 million next year, just a rough calculation would be another $20 a megawatt hour. Again, before transmission costs and again, before green credit. Is that the way we should read this?
I think that is, yeah, roughly. It's hard to say exactly, but you can see that this I think this is green. This green one here is NCAS, or is most of the NCAS. So I'll preface that by saying we actually divide NCAS up into two different types of NCAS. One is what we call peak NCAS, which is the majority of the NCAS costs. Those are recovered the same way as reserve capacity costs. And then we have other NCAS costs, which are recovered, I think, proportionally with consumption, but don't take my word for that. So this represents, this green one represents most of it. So if you take that, those green boxes and scale them up proportionally with this increase, you know, if we take this one 190 to 390, that's roughly a doubling. So if you double this green one, yeah, that is probably a reasonable way to make a rough estimate on how much that on the impact of that increase.
And those are recovered through capacity charges.
Most of them, yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get a feel for where we might expect prices to be next year. If you then utilize the standard offer product that's being offered by Synergy for 26, which is about $117 for energy, you're starting to look at a fairly substantial number for these rates, right?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with those commercial aspects, so I won't comment on that. No. We provide these. We try to provide this information to be you know, as transparent as possible. Provide as much information as possible for you to make your own assessments and for you to make your own decisions.
Yep. And we're relying on that transparency and that information. Thanks very much, Nicholas.
Yep. No worries, Wayne. And as usual, if you have feedback on information that you find useful, we always like to hear that.
Cheers, mate.
Great. Well, there's no further questions in the chat in relation to either this or the previous presentation. So thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks, Aidan.
I'll hand over now to Adrian Pearce, who's going to give us a rundown of the Q3 QED from this year. So Adrian, over to you.
Yep. Thanks, Aidan. Just give me a quick thumbs up if you can see all that and hear me as well.
I can see you and hear you, and the presentation is up.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you very much. So yeah, just quickly, my name's Adrian Pearce. I actually work in Nick Nielsen's team as well. And I'll be going through the QED that we published about 3 weeks ago now. So if you attended the real-time insights, real-time market insights forum, so the RIF, this will be a bit of a repeat for you, but for those that haven't, the QED is essentially our quarterly report where we publish things like demand for the quarter, how it's changed from the previous year quarter, prices, things like that as well. So a couple of quick key trends. one of the big things that we saw was a relatively large increase in operational demand, so 219 megawatts or 11%, partially driven by a very wintry winter, so cooler, as well as an increase in battery charging as well, which Nick touched on, but we saw it, and we'll go through it again a little bit here, just to see how specifically it's impacted Q3, and it might provide a bit more specific detail for you. I'll just get my pointer up as well. We also saw a couple of records. I guess this one's actually been outdated now. So we saw it at the time, this was a new minimum unscheduled operational demand record of about 449 megawatts. That's obviously not including any demand caused by battery withdrawal. So operational demand, which includes that number, was actually 833 megawatts in that interval. But as we know now, we've now hit this. We've gone even lower, down to 383 just in the past couple of days. So this is still a Q3 record, but it's no longer the all-time record. And I think that just goes to show, I guess, how quickly some of these things are changing within the Swiss and within the WEM. Couple of Q3 specific records in renewable contribution. So that was 36.4%, and we'll get to that a bit later. So that was overall for the quarter. And we also saw a peak interval for Q3s at 83.2%. So obviously not quite the 89% we've seen a bit more recently as the overall record, but this was still the record overall for Q3s. So I guess some positive things there to see. We did see an increase in energy prices. I guess that aligns with what Nick talked about as well. So that went to a tick over $101, an increase of $21. And I guess the themes are similar to what's been already talked about, but we'll reflect on that as well in the context of Q3 too. This report, you can go to this link here. We published it on the 30th of October, so it's been out for a couple of weeks now. If you haven't read it yet or had a chance to, I guess the high-level details are in this presentation, but if you want more specifics, please feel free to go there and read it. It's towards the end after the NEM stuff. Okay, so our first chart. What this one indicates, a bit of a funny graph to sometimes get your head around first look, but this is the overall impacts to operational demand compared to last quarter. So for example, if something is above the line, that means it's contributed to an increase in operational demand compared to Q3 2024. If there's something below the line, it means it's had a decreasing impact on operational demand, or estimated in some case, compared to Q3 2024. So what you can see here is this red dotted line. This is the overall increase in operational demand that we experienced. So that's all the demand met by dispatching facilities. So that went to 2,228 megawatts for the quarter, which was obviously, as I said before, an increase. We saw lower temperatures, 2.1 degrees less than the last Q3, which was driving up underlying demand all by itself, particularly, I guess, in these sort of morning and evening peaks. At the other times of the day, so overnight and during the middle of the day, you can see the primary driver, or one of the primary drivers of the increase in underlying demand, was also the battery charging. So this is where we typically see batteries charging, I guess largely because of the price profile as well. But we see overnight and during the middle of the day the increase in battery charging, and that was up 77 megawatts in Q3 2024. So if you go back a couple of slides, you'll see in Nick's presentation the change this year in the new capacity, so a significant increase in battery capacity, as well as a couple of other things as well. But we've added, I think, three new batteries, and there's more to come as well. So that's why we see that increase in battery charging. Now, this also indicates that there was a decrease in DPV. So if we see an increase in DPV, it means it's had a reducing effect on operational demand. Our numbers showed for this quarter that we estimated a decrease in DPV. And even though we saw a decrease in solar irradiance because it was quite cloudy and wet this winter, we actually think there was probably, there's potential that there was actually an increase in DPV. It was just that last Q3, our modelling may have overstated it slightly compared to the modelling we use now. So just, I guess, take that with a slight grain of salt. Generally, the trend for DPV is because of the continued increase in capacity. We tend to see increases in DPV contributions, but that's just something to note here. There's also a small component of embedded systems increasing their output. What embedded systems are they like behind the fence generation that can send stuff back over into the grid, but they're not registered facilities or dispatchable facilities. Okay, change in generation. I guess the big story here, or the big couple of ones, is the battery increase of 68 megawatts, as well as the increase in coal. So this increase in coal of 92 megawatts, you can see it happens at all times of the day, and we saw an increase in operational demand at all times of the day. So that was essentially to meet that demand. The battery and even the hybrid increase. So we had a new hybrid facility since the last Q3. You can see that the times of day that they serve, well, the batteries is the morning peak and the evening peak. The battery solar hybrid is during the day for the solar, and then it also provides some continuing contribution through the evening using its battery component. There was also a small amount of biomass, and there's a waste to energy project that's contributing largely to this increase, and that represented 24 megawatts. In terms of renewable contributions, as I talked about before in the key trend slide, we saw a Q3 high of 36.4%, with contributions of 14.7 from DPV, 15.5 from wind. We also currently still have battery injection or battery discharge included within this figure. This is something that we're reviewing, whether it's something that we would continue to include within our renewable contribution metrics, partially because they're largely agnostic to what they charge with, depending on the time of the day and what's happening at that time. But that's something that we're going to review. For now, for this quarter, it's unchanged, so it's still contributing to this metric at the moment. So that was a high for Q3s. Likewise, over here you can see the peak capacity, so the peak renewable contribution for an individual interval. So basically we see across the quarter for an interval what was the highest renewable contribution, and this was 83.2%. So a relatively large contribution from distributed PV at 56%, and then quite a strong contribution from wind at 18.2%, with some lesser contributions, but still welcome, of grid solar at 4.8 and hybrids at 2.5%. Okay, I guess if you've been following this as well for the last couple of quarters, one thing that we've seen is an increase or a capture of the FCAS markets by batteries. So on the left-hand side, what we have is percentages per of market share for each FCAS service, not including the rate of change of frequency control service. So these are the ones that are dispatched in megawatts, rock-off control services in megawatt seconds. But this is the ones that batteries can contribute to, and they're capturing 77% overall of that market. And you can see the numbers there for yourself. So that's quite a large change compared to Q3 last year, where it was much lower. So 56 percentage point increase. I think there was only one battery accredited for FCAS last year, and now we have 3. With more on the way as well. So if this is the contingency and regulation markets, just a quick thing on the rock-off control service market, given synthetic inertia isn't regarded as being able to provide this service. Currently only gas and coal facilities provide this, and we have 63.1% of this service being provided by gas, and coal is doing 36.9% of this market share. The only other thing I wanted to highlight from this section is that we've seen an increase in largest load contingency, and that's driven by so load contingencies. For example, if a battery is withdrawing and they trip off, we've seen more and bigger batteries come online, so we've seen larger and larger load contingencies. So therefore, we've also seen the requirement for contingency lower increase in line with that as well. So that went up. Increased by 72 megawatts, or 105%. As was touched on a little bit earlier, we've seen a flattening of the price profile across the day. So this is the yellow line here, tracks the Q3 2024 price profile on average, and the purple line tracks the Q3 2025 average. So one thing that you can pretty easily tell is that the peaks are a lot lower and the trough is higher. And so it creates an overall flatter price profile. So overall, it was $101, up 27%. But that kind of masks that there's been a real flattening of this price profile. Now, one thing you can see on the right-hand side is this is our average battery charge and discharge. So the charge is obviously on the lower hand of the graph, and the discharge or the injection is on the higher end of the graph. And you can see that the charging components align with higher price profiles, and the injection components align with lower peaks as well. And that was touched on by Nick. Now, that's not the only contributor specifically to this trough here. So prior to the FCAS cost review, we had a lot more facilities committed during the middle of the day due to how the tie breaking was working. Now there's less facilities on providing that service, and so that necessarily means that we have has to be covered by other generations, so that gets pushed up. Now, that generally what that has meant is that you see less FCAS uplift costs and more that being transferred into the energy market, which is probably a more transparent way to show the cost to the market in any case. And that's all that I had for those ones. Aidan, I might pass it back to you. Was there any questions that that have come through?
Thanks, Adrian. No, there's no questions in the chat yet, so I might just pause for 5 seconds and see if anybody wants to put their hand up. 3, 2, 1. No questions, Adrian. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks, Aidan. Thanks all.
Brilliant. Okay, so our next presenter is Nick Zhang, who'll be walking us through the outcomes from this year's reserve capacity cycle. Nick, over to you. You can just put the slide pack in share mode, and you're still currently on mute.
Sorry, sorry, let me know if you can see the slide pack and I see my face.
I can see the slide pack. I can't see your face. I think your camera, yep, I think your camera's coming on now. There we are. And
you can hear, let me know if you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. I can see you, and the pack is being shared.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Zhang. I'm a senior analyst from the WA Capacity Investment and Assessment team. The CIA team, as we know for, is responsible for evaluating new capacity investments and assessing the certification of reserve capacity, or CRC, under the mechanism. So as you may be aware, the 2025 CRC process has now concluded. I'd like to share some key outcomes and insights with you. Before we dive into the details, let me give you a quick overview of the Reserve Capacity Mechanism, or RCM. The RCM encourages capacity investment in the Swiss to meet the peak demand 2 years ahead. So each year, AEMO sets the reserve capacity requirement, or RCR, in the WAM Electricity Statement of Opportunities, or WAM issue. After that, the capacity providers apply for capacity certification for their facilities. AEMO then undertakes due diligence to certify capacity credits based on the capacity those facilities can deliver during the peak demand. Once being certified, the capacity providers must then make their capacity available for the relevant period to receive their capacity payment. If they fail to meet their reserve capacity obligations, they are required to pay refunds back to the market. So in the recently completed 2025 CRC process, a total of 6,372 peak capacity credits and 4,077 flexible capacity credits were being assigned, both exceeding the peak and flexible reserve capacity requirement. On facility-wise, 24 new facilities and 1 facility upgrade were assigned capacity credits, adding a total of 543 megawatts new capacity to the RCM. The peak reserve capacity price is calculated at 360,700 per megawatts per year. This equals to the benchmark reserve capacity price. Because the peak capacity credits we assigned falls within the 5% of that band, We'll cover this in more detail on a later slide. This slide gives you a visual overview of the capacity credits journey through the 2025 CRC process. First, the WEM issue set the reserve capacity requirement at 6,238 megawatts. That's the amount of capacity needed to meet the peak demand in the Swiss for the 27 to 28 capacity year. AEMO then received 105 CRC applications as part of the CRC process, totaling around 6,744 megawatts. And after AEMO's assessment, 7 applications with 172 megawatts were being rejected. The main reason is that they lack of evidence of network access by October 1st, 2027. The further reduction of 55 megawatts, as you can see from the slide, came from the updated calculations for intermittent generators, which are reassessed every year using the relevant level mass storage, or we call RLM. So we ended up assigning 6,580 megawatts of CRC to 98 facilities. After AEMO assigns CRC, then there's a bilateral trade declaration processes, we call it BTD. 142 megawatts were made unavailable to the market during the BTT process, leaving 6,375 megawatts of peak CRC across 94 facilities. The final step in the CRC is a network access quantity, or NAQ adjustment. This year, there were no NAQ reductions, so the final capacity credits remains at 6,375 megawatts, which means all the CRC certified reserve capacity translated to the capacity credits. This resulted in a surplus of 137 megawatts over the reserve capacity requirement. Let's look at the new capacity. In total, 24 new facilities and 1 upgrade have been successful in 25 CRC, as we touched upon in the previous slide, adding 543 megawatts new capacity. The upgrade was the Warradaj Wind Farm Stage 2, contributing 19.4 megawatts. And the largest new player comes from the AGL's expansion of the Kwinana plant, Perth Energy Kwinana GT2. This is a firm gas generator with a peak capacity of 176 megawatts, and it's going to play a crucial role in supporting Western Australia's plan to phase out coal by 2030. Next up is Mushay ESR1, developed by Neoen. Earlier this year, this project was successful in the federal government's capacity investment scheme. So it's great to see it has received 4 capacity credits, further strengthening WA's renewable energy transition. It's also worth mentioning that those new batteries, including the Varuna's battery, they are all assigned capacity credits based on 6 hours of generation, up from the previous 4 hours. And if you look at the pie chart on the right, you will see that more than half of the new capacity comes from renewables, including storage and intermittent generators. And meanwhile, all the new capacity under the non-intermittent generating systems comes from diesel or gas generators. On the reserve capacity price, as part of the reserve capacity mechanism review, RCM review, amendments were made to the ESM rules this year to enhance price signals and support more efficient investment decisions. Key changes made this year include, first, a steeper capacity price curve during periods of capacity shortfall, giving stronger incentives for new investment when supply is tight. Second, this year introduced a plus and minus 5% dead band around the reserve capacity requirement, which helps reduce price volatility caused by minor changes in capacity due to facility transfer requirements or facility builds. Third, there's a flexible reserve capacity price curve to better support the facilities with the ability to ramp up and ramp down quickly. For the 27 to 28 capacity year, the peak capacity credits of 6,375 megawatts. This is a 1.9% higher than the reserve capacity requirement. As this 1.9% surplus falls within the 5% dead band, so the reserve capacity price equals the benchmark reserve capacity price. The flexible price is calculated at 180,350, which is lower than the peak price. So this year there will be no, for 27 to 28 capacity year, there will be no additional payment for the flexible capacity. And this outcome reinforces the intent behind the pricing rule amendments, which aims to minimize price uncertainty and create a more stable investment environment for the Swiss. I'll stop here. Let me know if you have any questions.
Hi, Nick. There's a couple of questions in the chat, so I'll throw over first to Glenn Neal, who's asked a question around the evidence that we receive with regards to network access and where some applications might be lacking. Glenn, could you speak to your question?
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. Just checking you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. No, Nick, you just I just caught my ear. You said that there was a bunch of failed applications because of lack of evidence. Just wanted to know if you can shed a bit more light on what that looks like.
No problem. And this year there were a few applications being rejected. The primary reason of the 7 applications being rejected is, and most of them, the lack of evidence. Because the one rule clause 4.10.1 BA requires the facility applying for certification of reserve capacity to have evidence from network operator. They will have network access by the October 1st, 2027, which is the starting point of the relevant capacity year. So most of these applications being rejected, we can't see evidence from those to meet this rule requirement. So this is the primary reason they were being rejected.
Yeah, I guess I was just chasing a little bit more color around, that is a bit of a, open to interpretation in some degree. Was it just a case they didn't submit any evidence whatsoever, or I guess trying to understand if they did submit evidence and how it didn't meet your requirements. I guess we're just trying to get a bit of a sense for that, bit of a feel for that. Sorry.
Thanks. I'm not sure if we can share the details, but I think the reasons, the circumstances varies across different applications. But as a rule of thumb, the main criteria, we have to see evidence. So there's a confirmation from
If I can just jump in, Nick.
Yes, please.
So there are different forms of documentation that participants have to provide to us for us to confirm whether the facility is going to be able to be online by 1st of October of the relevant capacity year. Now, in the instance of some of these applications, that there wasn't an ETAC, which is probably the best form of evidence you can provide, but we understand that to get an ETAC 2 years ahead is probably tricky. And in the absence of that, there is an avenue where participants can also provide us with a letter of status from Western Power. And we do take that letter with a seriousness because it does come from the network operator, and the dates in those letters allow us to make a decision around whether there is sufficient information in there for this facility to be online 1st of October 2027. So those are a couple of examples that I can share with you that, we did not see enough evidence of those facilities being there for that relevant capacity.
Yeah. So they as you pointed out, and probably it's why I'm asking the question. It can take time to get an ETAC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They just didn't have the right, I guess, that letter of status from Western Power or something from Western Power to give you guys that confidence that they're going to be online and for the capacity year.
That's right.
All good. No, great. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Glenn. So just a reminder on this one in particular that we're unable to answer questions regarding any specific application as part of the process. That information is obviously confidential to the applicant. So next question was from Wayne Trumbull. So this was around the transitional reserve capacity price for 27-28. Wayne, do you want to speak to your question?
Pretty straightforward, Aidan, as read.
Okay, so I'll read it out then. So what was the transitional reserve capacity price set at for 27-28 capacity year, and what percentage of capacity credits assigned by AEMO will receive the transitional price, and what percentage of the $360,000 price?
Okay, I choked on that number too.
So I answered that in the chat
Oh, you
underneath
answered in the
there,
chat.
but
Oh,
the
great.
transitional price is $177,636. And then we publish the proportion at each price. We publish the number of capacity credits. I'll have to jump out and grab my calculator to get the proportion of them, but we've got under the transitional price 4,048 capacity credits were at the transitional price. So I'd have to get my calculator, but
So the remainder are at
yeah,
the remainder to 6,375.
yeah.
That's fine.
And it's just in the market data site, so that's automatically published if you want to check that at any point as well. Not that we can always answer questions, but also it's there if you want to access it late at night.
Thanks.
Okay. Next question was from Dimitri. Actually, a couple of questions. Dimitri, do you want to speak to it? One was on DSP and the other was on 6-hour BESS. Dimitri.
Thanks, Adam. So yeah, there are two questions. The first is, for a single facility, can demand-side program capacity credits and the regular ESR capacity credits be added together? This is the first question. The second is regarding the additivity of peak and flex capacity credit. For example, for a 6 hours BESS, can such a BESS receive both peak and flex capacity credits simultaneously?
I'm not sure if I understand your first question, but for the second question, and the peak capacity credits and the flexible capacity, they are not like the two separate price. Like as for 27 to 28 capacity year, the flexible capacity price is lower than the peak as we calculated, so there will be no top-up payment. So the flexible price is like an incentive to incentivize those facilities they can ramp up quickly. So there will be no like separate for those batteries or for any other facilities.
Understood. Thank you. And for the first question, so within one facility, if you have a flexible demand and BESS behind the meter, so can we receive capacity credits for the demand side program and for the BESS?
I will take down these questions and I will get back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Dimitri. So the final question in the chat is from Wayne Trumbull again, and it was a question regarding whether or not any reserve capacity applicants were rejected as a result of a lack of firm fuel arrangements. I'll defer here maybe to Neetika Kapani, but also just to say that obviously we can't provide any information that would indicate the outcome for any particular applicant.
Thanks, Aidan. You've actually answered the question. We don't share details around that, but in saying that, we did put down a fuel sufficiency guideline this time around on the website to just give participants an understanding of what we look at when we consider firm and non-firm fuel arrangements. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Neetika. Okay, thank you very much for that, Nick. There's no further questions on reserve capacity in the chat, and so we'll just move on to the next presentation. So to talk to us about Swiss Summer Readiness, we've got Sophie Burgess online. Sophie, can you test your mic?
Hello, can you hear, see, and see my slides?
I can see your slides, I can see you, and I can hear you as well. So you're ready to go.
No worries. All right, so I'm Sophie Burgess. I'm a power systems engineer in the WA operations planning team. So I'm just going to give a bit of an overview on the summer readiness we're looking at for the coming summer. And I will just Let me get my slides. Okay, I will just caveat that these slides have been put together ahead of time, and of course things constantly change in terms of forecasts and outages. So talk a lot about high level messages here, but take sort of the really fine level detail stuff with a grain of salt as things constantly change. As we can tell here with the minimum demand record, this has already been smashed as what constantly happens when you put together slides with a record in them. The WEM goes and breaks it. So as an overview for the summer, we're looking at pretty similar to recent years, of course, above average temperatures with a good chance of unusually higher temperatures this year. We're expecting a peak demand forecast of 4,601 megawatts in the high forecast, and this would be above the 4,468 megawatt record that we currently have set earlier this year. So there is a good chance that we are possible to exceed this all-time record this coming summer. For generation and transmission, so at the moment, no major planned generator or transmission outages for the current hot season, just focused on those hot months. We've got a lot of outages throughout November and some sort of scattered in December and March that I'll talk about in a moment. Operational outlook, so reserve levels mostly healthy for the period, but obviously like last year, we're seeing a heightened risk of lack of reserve conditions for January and February. And in line with this, there's additional capacity, including NCAS and supplementary capacity that's been procured for this hot season. And I'll also touch on the operational actions that we have ready to go for these LOR days, including sort of dispatching our generation, including the register facility NCAS, and then the additional actions we have for LOR. So this is sort of an overview for temperature wise. I've just here pulled the one for January to March. The one for the remainder of the year, it wasn't sort of showing as much here. This is the more key one to pull. We're very likely to see warmer than average days and nights for January to March, which is not a huge surprise there, I suppose, and most of the country really is. But sort of this here is the median maximum temperature. So this is looking at your daytime max. And here the median minimum is overnight max. So I suppose this here is a real telling that the whole of the WEM really is going to see very strong chance of above average minimum temperatures, which is going to potentially make those heat waves go for a longer amount of days, heat banking up in houses where there's not enough time sort of overnight for that temperature to drop enough. So for operational outlook, in this graph here, we've got, so at the bottom here is the forecasted demand, and it's sort of a little bit jagged as you see, because these are the weekends, and then it'll be weekdays down to a weekend, where we typically see lower demand. We've then got, including the reserve margin here, the load forecast plus that reserve margin. In green is the generation capacity for facilities with capacity credits and the NCAS contracts for registered facilities. So just noting this doesn't include facilities outside of this that are currently commissioning that I'll talk about in a moment. And then in the line here, we've got the available generation, which is including a current outlook of planned and forced generator outages when this slide was put together. So the key takeaway here, we've got a period in January and February where if we had full reserve margin, this would actually exceed the total generation by a maximum of 100 megawatts here. And just noting that this planning margin quantity above is calculated by the largest supply contingency plus 70% of the second largest supply contingency. Where that's derived from, there's information on the AEMO website if you're more interested in that one that we're more than welcome to send through. So there's portions where this will exceed, which is where we're seeing the heightened risk of LOR conditions. So I will note here, there is additional capacity not included in this figure that will be talked about as well at the end of my presentation. Supplementary capacity, NCAS that's being procured for the peak demand season from unregistered facilities, and we've got demand side programs that's not included here. So for generation and transmission availability, here in the graph, we've just got an overview of the synchronous generation and battery energy storage systems. So this doesn't include all full overview of generation For example, it's not including intermittent renewable generation. This is more a look at the firm capacity we've got here. So you can see that the reduction there in synchronous generation is attributed to the retirement of Muja G6 facility earlier in the year. And there was also the removal of PRK AG, or aka Pakistan, capacity credits this year. And then subsequently, but we've also had an increase in that BESS capacity from the inclusion of Collie BESS 2 since last summer. So as a whole, this figure has gone up slightly in terms of that total capacity there. So for major generation changes and high impact transmission changes for this summer compared to last summer. So outages wise, we've had throughout this month some outages for Nijen Kwinana's facility, and then we've got Muja G7, G8, and Olympus Pinjarra Unit G1 have got some scattered shorter outages through December and March. I'll note for commissioning, currently Collie ESR4 and Collie ESR5 are undergoing commissioning, and they'll potentially receive their IATGN or interim approval to generate. I very rarely say that out during the summer period, which each of those facilities is a 250 megawatt 4-hour BESS facility at nameplate capacity that aren't included in any of these figures today. And then transmission-wise, the Blue Waters SHOTS CBB 91, so 330 kV line has just been completed at SHOTS Terminal that connects the two Collie ESR4 and Collie ESR5 that is new this hot season. To touch on operational actions that we have on the day, so as sort of system normal, we've got reserve capacity done ahead of time, supplementary capacity, and NCAS is procured and certified. As with every day, dispatching all available market generation and NCAS for registered facilities, which includes storage. And this is sort of the actions that we take up to LOR1. And then when we're forecasting LOR2 conditions, that's when some of these additional LOR actions fall in, including activating demand-side programs, supplementary capacity, and NCAS. I also will note that it's not stated here on this slide, but this summer there may be the use of state of charge rising floor constraints in LOR conditions for batteries. And I won't go into too much detail on that today because there will be a full presentation on it next week at the RIF. So I would encourage you to attend that if you're interested in what that one's going to entail. But then as we fall into LOR3, that's where we would activate generation without capacity credits in an emergency operating state. And if all else, direct Western Power to reduce load on the Swiss. And I'll just note market advisories are sent out when the lack reserve conditions are declared. And then I will quickly hand over to Olivia, who's just going to speak on supplementary capacity this summer.
Thank you, Sophie. Hope everyone can hear me okay.
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Olivia Hill from AEMO, WA Registration, Monitoring and Procurement Team. I will give you a quick update on supplementary capacity. AEMO is procuring supplementary capacity service for this summer. Our tender started in August. Following a competitive tender process, we now have notified all successful tenderers and shortlisted sufficient capacity to meet the 142 megawatt shortfall target. The procurement is on track. AEMO and the service providers are working closely and aiming to commence the contract by 1st December. The commencement of the SC contract is subject to verification of network access and also service providers meeting all contractual conditions precedent. This year, we have a combination of contracted SC service. This includes availability and activation contracts from registered facilities and unregistered equipment. We also have activation-only contracts for load reductions from unregistered equipment. The difference, unlike the availability and activation contracts, the activation-only contracts, they have no availability payment, and the activation is voluntary by the service providers. Within AEMO, we will have an activation plan in place to manage LOR conditions during this hot season. We are still now at the final stage to execute and commence all the contracts. When the procurement is fully concluded, we will share more details and publish on our website. So that's all from me today for supplementary capacity. I will hand over to Sophie or Aidan. Thank you.
Okay, it's back to me. We've just got one question in the chat. So Jane Glynn from LX. Jane.
Hi, yeah, and I'm just curious, obviously, with DSPs and supplementary capacity and NCAS kind of all in the mix in those LOR conditions. I'm just curious about how those decisions are made when you're trading off the different options.
I can jump in there. I think that one might actually be addressed next week in the RIF presentation, which is probably best to tune into that one if you're interested to hear.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sophie and Olivia. And Laura, if you can please share the slide pack again. Brilliant. So just a very brief retrospective. We've only got 14 minutes left. Just wanting to talk very briefly about engagement throughout the last calendar year, as this is the last WA ECF for 2025. Just note that we haven't quite yet had 3 strategic energy forums, but come this time next week, we will have had 3. This is our 4th WA ECF for the year. We've had 2 WA GCFs, 2 WA DER market participation forums, 2 industry testing forums, 4 real-time market insight forums, and a range of working groups. So we've got the RIG in the WA Reform Implementation Group, the Procedure Change Working Group, Forecasting Reference Group, and of course the Magic Projects Working Group, which I spoke to previously. Also, in addition to that, a bunch of webinars, briefings, including the upcoming briefing date yet to be announced in relation to the upcoming release of the WA GSU. Also, 20 consultations on procedures and 18 procedures released. Many hundreds of people attending WEM training as well. And I think really the point of this slide is to say there's been a lot of activity, but really all of these forums, working groups, consultation processes are dependent on your participation. And what I've seen using the WA ECF as an example of that is usually around 60 to 100, sometimes even more people participating, giving away a couple of hours of their time to listen to AEMO talk. So I want to thank you, market participants and other interested stakeholders, for your attention, your interest, and your participation as well. The questions that we get are fantastic, and certainly if there's any way that we can improve the format of these forums or how we interact and how we respond, we're very happy to have that feedback. All right, next slide. All right, we do have a space here for questions and feedback. We can come back to that shortly if there are any, but if you just want to click over to the next slide. So just flagging upcoming forums. So like I said, we've got the Real-Time Market Insights Forum upcoming next week on the 26th. The WA Strategic Energy Forum on the 27th, Major Projects Working Group, last one of the year on the 1st of December, Procedure Change Working Group, and the GSU webinar. We'll be sending out a invite for that relatively shortly with the next WA ECF and WA GCF dates to be announced. All right, next one. All right, look, that's kind of it, folks. So we are 11 minutes ahead of schedule. There's an opportunity now to ask a question of the AEMO folk online in relation to the presentations delivered today. So I'll just leave that for 10 seconds, maybe, if you've got any questions. Otherwise, we'll sign off early and you've got time to make a coffee or have a break prior to your next meeting. Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you very much for your attendance today and participation, and we look forward to seeing you at our next forum. Thank you and be safe.
Thanks, guys. Good presentation.
Thanks, everyone.